We do assign gender at birth, and we do not always get it right, period.
Period. That's today's Democrat Party. Gender confusion from birth. Maybe they need better lighting. Maybe they need, you don't want them touching because, well, we know enough about them. Or we don't want that. You see the Planned Parenthood nutcase, you know, Democrat in good standing with the Democrat Party. Bill Taverner, he's the executive director of Planned Parenthood Center for Sex Education. Why would they have a center for sex education at Planned Parenthood? No one survives except for AOC because she's a Planned Parenthood baby. She tunneled out. It's like Hogan's Heroes at her Planned Parenthood. Bill Taverner, the executive director of the Planned Parenthood Sex Education Center, he says that babies are sexual beings from birth and that, a good education in porn and porn literacy is useful because that's your Democrat Party today. There's something terribly wrong. You know, just a few years ago, if you're going around saying things about this, the FBI would show up at your home and put handcuffs on you instead of what they're doing now with pro-life people and things like that. Well, happy Friday. Happy Friday and welcome. Not a very happy open, but, this is what the Democrats are up to. Crazy people. And that was, of course, a mother and a parent and a teacher at a Fairfax County Parent-Teacher Association meeting. She was both parent and teacher, and she thinks that sometimes you just get gender wrong because that's how it happens. Aren't they amazing? Just extraordinary. Man, oh, man. And but they're here to fix it, aren't they? So let's go, Michael, with that, let's go to the telephones. Let's go to Gary calling from Loudoun County in Virginia. Gary, you're on the Chris Plante Show.
Good morning, Chris.
Hey, Gary.
There's a great line from C.S. Lewis that impacts directly on this. The problem with trying to make yourself stupid is that you very often succeed. And now we send our kids to school to make them stupid. If gender is something you can figure out at age 2 or 3, right? If adults can't get this right in schools, what else are they teaching them about some of the more difficult subjects like civics or history or math? Is there anything they've gotten right? My guess is no.
Well, that's right. These people, they're so fundamentally misguided. They tell us that, and I was reading something today about the United States of America being founded in 1619 because the radical extreme left wing, the Democrat Party, they've made up this fallacy, the New York Times helped, that the United States of America wasn't born in 1776. No, it was founded before George Washington's grandparents were born in 1619 when a ship arrived and there was a black African who was a slave and who was sold by other black Africans on the beaches of Africa to Europeans who were buying people from black Africans and came to the United States. And this whole project, the 1619 project, is so utterly misguided. The reality is they say that's the first a black African slave to arrive on what much later became the United States of America. It's so wrong and so false in so many different ways. First of all, the Spanish arrived.
I wonder what gender he was.
I do. I wonder what gender it was, because, it is a gender option in San Francisco now. If you want your 12.
You remember when Biden was asked how many genders are there? And he said that this is the most transgender rights are the most important issue of his presidency. But somebody asked him and threw him really off guard. How many genders were there? And Mike the Lib couldn't tell you how many genders there were. So it's the most important civil rights issue ever. And it's being taught in schools, but nobody knows what it is. It's an astonishing time we live in.
It is an astonishing time. And they claim to be the party of science. The reality is obviously that they are the party of anti-science. They are as unscientific as any gang of troglodytes that history has seen, certainly in modern times. They'll be burning witches in no time. In fact, they do have a modern version of burning witches. But you're right, of course, that a great C.S. Lewis quote, too. But if they can't teach these very, very fundamental things to the children of America, then why would we trust them to teach anything else? And the reality is, it's not that every teacher is a bad person, but the teachers' union, because it's certainly not true. And a great many teachers, and I've spoken to numerous teachers, I can't say a great many, but certainly a number of teachers, who just roll their eyes and say, well, it's insane what's happened at the school board level and with the principals and in the macro level with the teachers' unions, who are, of course, very much in bed with the Democrat Party. And the Democrat Party is a party that is in the throes of gender dysphoria. They got the luggage thief who's in charge of nuclear waste at the Department of Energy. At the Department of Health and Human Services, they have the admiral who dresses up in a Navy uniform, and she, in high school, was he, and he played football with the man who is now the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Thoroughly Modern Milley, and the Democrat Party has flushed the very concept of gender down the drain. I was reading the other day, I don't know if you heard it, Gary, San Francisco has a new program, the radical left-wing lunatics there, to provide $1,200 a month payments to people that identify as transgender. They have a big, long form that you must fill out when applying for your $1,200 a month of other people's money. And the number of different gender options is mind-boggling. I think it's around 90, right? And one of them is gender
as defined by Facebook.
I'm sorry?
As defined by Facebook. It is ruled by lunatics. You and I both know it's all the same poison. As many crazy things as are introduced here. We on the right are playing whack-a-mole with it. There's this problem, there's justice problems, there's problems in the military. It's all the same poison, as we all know. Sadly, it's the overthrow of the country, and you rip the family apart. You tear science apart with this nonsense with these lunatics, and they're all singing off the same hymnal for the same reason. It's time to get rid of this country. Can I make a prediction on your show now?
You betcha.
Here goes. 10 years ago, the idea that women and girls would be forced to shower and share bathrooms with boys and men was unthinkable. Of course, now we're the ones who are crazy if we don't accept it. Grooming. I'm telling you, Chris, grooming will be out and proud, and people will say, just like that quote you just read from that lunatic, from the time they're 6 months old on, we got to groom these kids. We got to get them sexually active. That's where this thing's heading, and they'll do it without shame. And there will be no FBI knocks on their door, no Child Protective Services.
Yeah. Well, I think you're 100%.
Maybe 2 years.
Maybe 2 years. You say?
That's my prediction. I could be off by a week or two, but yeah, 2 years.
I wouldn't bet against that because they have secured information dominance, and this is cultural Marxism. Make no mistake about it.
Uh-huh.
This is cultural Marxism, and they have done, and they are in the process of doing, to this country what the Soviet Union had dreamed of doing. They've taken over in it's cultural Marxism. They have secured information dominance. There was an interesting article yesterday in the Washington Times, your newspaper of record in Washington, D.C., about the Chinese attempting to secure cultural dominance around the world. Information dominance was the story. And this is their goal, the stated goal of the Chinese Communist Party. The radical left in the United States of America has been incredibly successful, shockingly successful, at securing information dominance in the United States of America. And they're using that information dominance to achieve radical goals that I think even they 5 years ago never imagined were possible. And they are...
The most powerful force on earth is the narrative. Who controls that controls everything that happens.
Yeah.
They set the terms of the debate. We use those stupid terms. When you read the article about the cross-dressing or the nuclear waste expert, the whole article referred to him as they and them, but a quote from him said, I made a mistake. And he didn't say, we made a mistake. He said, I made a mistake. So these knucklehead journalists are just going ahead and say, well, he calls himself they and them, so we have to do it too. They were arrested. Yeah, it was a difficult article to follow. But when he referred to himself, in quotes, he used the word I. So it just we're supposed to read off their silly kabuki script and like it. It's lunatics in charge, and they're laughing at us.
And they're laughing at us. I mean, it's so extraordinary. It's not necessarily the idiocracy. It's kind of the lunocracy, because they're not stupid people. They're intelligent people, and that's what makes them extremely dangerous. And again, like Black Lives Matter in their initial their charter, dead set against the nuclear family, right? It's worked so well for African Americans, they want to spread it to the rest of the country and to the rest of the culture. They're anti-family because the family competes with the state for control and power. Your parents, we got to stop thinking of parents, MSNBC has said many times, as having ownership of their own children. We've got to think of the collective as having ownership of the children. And this is their thing. And now Bill Taverner, executive director of Planned Parenthood's ironically named Sex Education Center, brazenly contending children are born as sexual beings while pushing for sex education beginning in kindergarten and promoting porn literacy for certain ages. This is what he's saying.
Grooming.
This is grooming.
It's grooming.
That's exactly right. And we have in our society,
there'll be no stigma. There'll be no stigma on grooming soon. That's my big prediction. I'm going on record. I go down to my grave saying this.
Well, you're the devil if you stigmatize people that are.
Yeah, well, I'll be. But I've got to say, it's so nice to hear you and your callers, because there are these bright points of sanity in the midst of the sea of lunacy that controls things. And so your callers and you and the whole station, WMAL, is this blowtorch of sanity here, knowing that not everybody buys into this. But just like the teachers you've talked to, that I've talked to, I'm out here in Loudoun County, they are not insane yet, but they are so cowed and so forced to submit or else.
Right.
This is the levers that they hold: the narrative, the paychecks, the pensions, everything else. It takes a huge jump of courage to break from this herd mentality. We saw what happened to the whole country from 2020 to 2022. The thing that shocked me and my buddies, especially my veteran buddies, they looked out and said, we had no idea the country would roll over that quickly, that completely. Yeah. Lockdowns, churches, stores, family businesses. So this lunacy thing that's happening in schools, I think it's every single state, every single public school board. I don't know where they came from, but they're all in now.
Well, here's a teacher in Texas on the subject.
We're not going to call them that. We're going to call them MAPs. No. Minor attracted persons. No. So don't judge people just because they want to have sex with a 5-year-old.
Right. Don't judge people just because they want to have sex with a 5-year-old. And the Planned Parenthood guy says, in our society, we have an assumption of sexuality of people being people with intellectual disabilities. What? Now we're on. It's a myth that's perpetuated, and really, we are all sexual beings from birth, he says, until death. So that's your Democrat Party. They're normalizing child molestation because you're not of the age of majority. You're not allowed to choose for yourself, but the Democrats will choose for you. Right? The party of Harvey Weinstein and Bill Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself, and the Democrat Party is normalizing child molestation. That's their mission. They're on a mission, and they're almost at the finish line. Did you know that banks can legally confiscate your money to bail themselves out? There's one catch, though. It's got to be during extraordinary times. Don't you think the shape we're in right now might qualify as extraordinary times? I think it's time to call 888-446-5320 to get your personal wealth protection guide. My friends at American Alternative Assets are there to help you protect your retirement, your savings, by rolling over your IRA and your 401k into a gold IRA. Fact is, you can hold physical gold and silver in your retirement account while maintaining its tax-deferred status. So call today, 888-446-5320, to get your free wealth protection guide. This guide will answer all the questions you have. Protect your savings now before it's too late. Call American Alternative Assets at 4GOLD20 to secure your free gold and silver guide today. That's 888-446-5320. Individual results may vary. There's no guarantee that past performance will be indicative of future results. Gary, thank you for a great call. And you're right, there are a lot of us out here, but the radical lunatics have secured information dominance, and they're going for cultural dominance. Next up, Fisher House.
If you've never met a Planned Parenthood baby, I'm happy to let you know that I am one.
There's only one Chris Plante. The Chris Plante Show.
If you are 65 or older, you know this. Watching your hard-earned dollars fly out the window on healthcare costs is frustrating. Well, here's something that can really help, and it's worth taking a minute to look into. MediShare 65 Plus. MediShare is a community of Christians who share each other's healthcare bills, and it really is a community too. People encourage and pray for each other. Well, MediShare 65 Plus is a low-cost option for those with Medicare Parts A and B, and it fills in the gaps where Medicare stops. It's a great way to fight inflation too. You can lock in one low monthly price for up to 10 years. And it's easy. You can use any Medicare-approved doctor or get 24/7 telehealth access from the comfort of your home. Very worth looking into during Medicare open enrollment, which ends December 7th. If you join right now, your second month share will be free. So don't miss this chance. Call 800-PSALM-16. That's 800-PSALM-16. 800-PSALM-16.
The World Tournament of Soccer happening in Qatar is finally here. And with all the weird kickoff times and all the other sports happening simultaneously, it can be kind of hard to keep up. So to make sure you're up to speed, be sure to listen to Qatar Kick Around for the daily wrap-up of all the action from the tournament. From the group stage all the way to the final, Andy, Lars, and Peter are here for you with recaps and opinions of what happened that day in Qatar. Everything can be found at thekickaround.com, the Cumulus Podcast channel on YouTube, or wherever you listen.
We'll get back to that wackadoodle-doo because we must. But right now, joining us, we have Stacy Thomas. And Stacy has been a military spouse and assistant house manager at a Fisher House in Landstuhl, Germany, which was one of the busiest places ever during the peak of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Thank you, Stacy, for being here. And thank you for being you and being with Fisher House. Now, you were there at one of the busiest times at Landstuhl of our combat wounded coming out of Iraq and out of Afghanistan. And as a military spouse, tell me what that time was like.
It was a very emotional time. We had about 100 families come through every month because the mission of the Landstuhl Hospital at that time was to stabilize those that were injured and until they were able to fly back to the U.S. and then have their more long-term care or, recovery treatments. And so our average stay was only about one night. And I will tell you that people deal with grief differently. And there were so many families that dropped absolutely everything to fly across the world in for the off chance that they could see their loved one still alive for just a small amount of time. We had some families come and almost immediately have to turn around and go back. And so just a very emotional time.
And then when their loved ones, when the combat wounded, brought back to the United States and to VA hospitals here, Fisher House was there for them again back here in the States.
Yeah, absolutely. There were a lot of families that came and stayed with us in Landstuhl, and then they, we would talk to another Fisher House location in the States, and they would go directly there.
God bless you, and God bless Fisher House and the extraordinary and amazing work that they do. Listen, I'd like to call on anyone that has the wherewithal. Give $10. Give $10 million. 888-294-8560. Thank you, Stacey.
This is the Chris Plante Show.
Now, the Democrats in California pushing for a healthy dose of reparations. I got to tell you, if I saw this, if I were 25 years old and had my 25-year-old wife with me and had a kid, or even if I didn't have a kid or two kids, I would move to and I'm black, I would move to California. Now is the time to move to California. It's like the new gold rush, because they're planning on giving away hundreds of thousands of dollars to each and every African American. There are some complications that they haven't thought of because they're not very smart, but they are guilty white liberals, and I'll get into that. Speaking of which, I wonder how Paul Pelosi's head is doing, and I wonder how that Green Party nudist activist, drug addict with the smash capitalism stuff is, the typical Trump supporter as described by the news media. Also, I checked yesterday, the NBC News correspondent is still nowhere to be found, the one who reported the good information about that. But we're talking about the Democratic Party and their myriad mental illnesses. The Fox News Digital has a story about this Planned Parenthood director of their sex education. Why would you have a sex education thing? I mean, what, for the survivors? How many? What is that? Who are you going to teach sex ed to? The women that are there are already pregnant, and, no one there gets out alive. So who are you teaching, honestly? But Fox News has the thing, the executive director of Sex Education Clinic, Bill Taverner, who says, that children are born sexual. Children are born sexual, while simultaneously advocating comprehensive sex education from kindergarten. Right? We have in our society, he says, an assumption of asexuality of people with intellectual disabilities. So I guess people by intellectual disabilities, that's a euphemism, talking about Joe Biden and a lot of Democrats out there with low IQs. And he's talking about having sex with, intellectually disabled people. He says it's a myth that's perpetuated, and we really are all sexual beings from birth until death, he says. This is what, and why is Planned Parenthood even operating in this lane? Doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's because they're screwy. They're screwy. The fundamentals of teaching sexuality. Sexuality is a part of life through all ages and stages, he said. Babies, elders, yes, elders, babies, and everyone in between can experience sexuality. Yeah, but it's illegal until you reach a certain point. But he's advocating babies. Taverner appeared to be saying in a 2012 interview that some of erotica pornography is useful. He said he further argues that teaching about pornography in classrooms is similar to instructing children on how to use a condom. Sure, well, that would be one example. We need to present opportunities for young people to think about, for example, their values, he says. You mean your values. Let's do an opinion activity. Let's do the ethics of porn, he says. And let's not say that there's a right answer. Yeah, who are we to judge? Well, we are, you know who we are? We're civilization, at least we used to be. This is Caligula's court. This is the collapse of the Roman Empire. They studied the playbook, and they're rolling it out here. Pretty amazing people. They also love communism. This is cultural Marxism in so many ways, and the Biden family has, of course, all kinds of business ties to communist China, as do many others in the Democrat Party. And in China, they have the white paper revolution going on there. They're yearning to breathe free, and you may remember Joe Biden's National Security Council spokesman, Comrade Kirby, saying that he has nothing to say about protesters there. He doesn't support them. He has nothing to say. In fact, Joe Biden was asked yesterday by a reporter, had to be Fox News. Joe Biden was asked because he was there with Macron and Fromage, the French president. They have slavery in China. They have forced labor. They have the Uyghurs, forced marriages because they're trying to exterminate the Uyghur people, an ethnic minority and a religious minority, a Muslim, Islamic a religious and ethnic minority that they're attempting to exterminate. They will doubtless be successful over time. And they have these forced marriages now where they're forcing Uyghur women to marry Chinese men, non-Uyghur Chinese men. And then their children, will not be as Uyghur because they're getting rid of the ethnic group which they consider to be a thorn in their side. So here's a reporter asking Joe Biden, well, how he feels about the brutality of the Chinese communists beating the hell out of people in a couple of dozen cities. The armored vehicles are now being called out. The headlines say they're tanks. I looked at the photos. They're tracked armored vehicles, but without cannons. They're military armored vehicles, good enough to kill, unarmed, and they're all unarmed because they've been disarmed by the Chinese Communist regime. Joe Biden last week talking about banning what he calls semi-automatic weapons, which is most handguns in America, and banning what he calls assault rifles, which would turn out to be most rifles. And in Iran, protesters have also been disarmed, and they're therefore helpless against their tyrannical masters. Can you say masters? And so here's a reporter attempting to give Joe Biden, the President of the United States and leader of the free world, an opportunity to condemn the brutality of the Chinese communists.
Thank you, folks. All right. So you have a message to the protesters in China you put Iran.
You have a message for the protesters, a message to the protesters in China, and he shuffled off to Buffalo with his arms hanging at his side and his mouth hanging open. And Emmanuel Macron was trying to guide him so he didn't bump into furniture like a jellyfish because he has the intellectual capacity somewhere just shy of a man-o'-war. I think a man-o'-war jellyfish, slightly smarter than Joe Biden. Recall Comrade Kirby, John Kirby, disgraced to his naval uniform. Hey, what does the president have to say to the people yearning to breathe free in communist China?
The president's not going to speak for protesters around the world.
He's not going to speak for what is he, president of the United States or something? You think he's leader of the free world? You kidding me? Well, come on. It's time. It's a time for choosing.
We're not taking a side in terms of what these protesters are about.
We're not taking a side. The communist Chinese are brutalizing their population, and the United States is not choosing sides.
Son, you're on your own.
That's a fact. Now, Tim Cook, who is, he was at the state dinner last night with a woman, not his wife, but she's a former Democrat administration official, his guest to the dinner last night. A beard, as they say. Tim Cook, first Fortune 500 CEO to come out openly as gay. Some doubtless secretly, but Tim Cook first openly. And he was up on Capitol Hill yesterday, probably spreading some cash around to the Democrats so they'll continue to back, the massacre of innocent Chinese people, and there won't be a peep out of them. They've done away with airdrops in China, so the protesters, it's what the protesters were using to communicate. And Tim Cook, a Democrat, a leftist, anti-freedom, anti-free speech, as the Democrat Party is today, anti-First Amendment, free practice of religion and speech. The press has been completely corrupted, and the First Amendment, completely against the Second Amendment. The left is coming for your rights. They're against the Bill of Rights. The Constitution of them is, something to be abused, and so are you. Tim Cook in the halls of Congress, and a Fox News, Fox Business reporter was there to try to get him to say, what about China, and why are you helping the brutal communist regime as they beat their slaves, their indentured servants, and their serfs?
Do you regret restricting airdrop access that protesters used to evade surveillance from the Chinese government?
He walks away from her.
Do you think it's problematic to do business with the Communist Chinese Party when they suppress human rights?
No, they love slavery. Tim Cook loves slavery. They love indentured servitude. They love serfdom in China. They love cheap labor. Did you see the employees at the one of the Apple plants there? They were locked in during the Chinese Communist lockdown, you know, where they welded the doors on that building and then it caught fire and 10 people were burned alive screaming while Tim Cook dined on lobster claws with a nice beurre blanc and caviar and champagne and, you know, and the Chinese slaves are burning alive. And you got to keep in mind that the Democrat Party is the party of the Confederate States of America. They're therefore the party of plantations and bullwhips and slavery. They're the party that created the White Knights of the Ku Klux Klan when it went away. They're the party that brought it back in the early 20th century. They're the party of Jim Crow, and they're consistent throughout history, if nothing else. And now they love, Tim Cook loves slavery. LeBron James loves slavery. And you give them the opportunity to condemn the brutalization of innocent people who are abused from birth to death, and they demur. They walk away. Joe Biden and Tim Cook gave the same answer. Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida is not a coward, and he doesn't love slavery. He doesn't love indentured servitude. He would not weld the doors shut and set the building on fire and laugh as the people burned alive while you enjoyed lobster claws. Almondine. I just want to throw in almondine there. Governor Ron DeSantis, and, you know, he was on the baseball field when the Bernie Sanders volunteers showed up with that Chinese-made rifle. It was a Chinese-made rifle when Congressman Steve Scalise was shot. That was a one-day news story, by the way. Not like Charlottesville or something like that. Ron DeSantis yesterday on Tim Cook and Apple and the Democrats turning a blind eye to the brutality in communist China.
Apple is not allowing the protesters to use this airdrop function where they're trying to communicate. That obviously is providing aid and comfort to the CCP.
The Communist Party is very grateful, and they will continue to assist Apple. You know, it is that you're sure they're being brutalized, sure they're being burned alive, sure they're being locked in to the factories. And I saw a headline that Apple's coming up short of iPhones. And your iPhone may cost more. And look, I've just got to raise my hand. I'm raising my hand, saying I'm against slavery, whether it's in China or whether it's in the United States 180 years ago. I'm against it. Now, the Democrats love to be angry with history if it's long gone. But when you're presented with the moral conundrum in the modern world, in the real world, they're silent, which is what their forebears were when they were running the Confederate States of America and led us into the Civil War. Governor Ron DeSantis is having none of it.
Don't be a vassal of the CCP on one hand and then use your corporate power in the United States on the other to suffocate Americans and try to suppress their right to express themselves.
Seems reasonable enough. Ron DeSantis is, and he's not reading from a script. He was speaking extemporaneously, I believe. And he speaks well, and he responds well to questions. You may remember in 2020, the Golden Globes. That's another Democrat circle fest where they give each other statuettes. And a lot of groping of children going on there, too. Ricky Gervais was the host, and Tim Cook of Apple was in the audience. And a whole lot of Hollywood people. And Ricky Gervais took it to him. Tom Hanks was making faces. Oh, I can't believe he said that.
Apple roared into the TV game with a morning show. A superb drama, yeah.
Shot of Tim Cook.
A superb drama about the importance of dignity and doing the right thing, made by a company that runs sweatshops in China. So, well, you say you're woke, but the companies you work for, I mean, unbelievable. Apple, Amazon, Disney. If ISIS started a streaming service, you'd call your agent, wouldn't you?
And he's 100% right, and he was mocking them, and it was true 2 year ago, more than 2 years ago. It was in January of 2020, I think, and you know, soon it'll be January of 2023. And what have we done about that as a culture? What about our political leadership? Honestly, the Democrats pretend to be pro this and pro that, but they lie a lot. You got to take that into account. I'm against buying cheaper things from communist China made by slave labor, made by the 1 billion serfs, the indentured servants of communist China. And I'm against sitting silently while this goes on. I do have my iPad and my iPhone over here. But, if you go for the other one, it's made by the slaves in communist China, too. We've got more with Fisher House coming up as well.
Wow. So I guess the new...
There's only one Chris Plante. The Chris Plante Show.
We are back, and we still have a lot of, crazy doodle-doo coming up. But right now, we're working with Fisher House today and yesterday, the great Fisher House. And you should call 888-294-8560 to give as generously as you can to the great people at Fisher House. And right now on the line, we have Brian Gaughan, Vice President of Community Relations with Fisher House, and a naval aviator, a now retired naval aviator. Brian, thank you for being here.
Chris, great to be here. Good to talk to you.
I've got to tell you, I'm wearing, just coincidentally, because I didn't know you were going to be here, I'm wearing my Fly Navy T-shirt today with the wings.
I like it. Chris, hey, 2 weeks ago, my older brother, John, who is a Navy Vietnam vet, was buried at Arlington National Cemetery with honors. And I was blessed to be there the night he passed with several members of our family from all across the country. It was a blessing to be there. And at that time, I thought of all the moms and dads and spouses and children and grandchildren all over America at the bedside of their service member or veteran who were staying at a Fisher House that same night. Right now I'm in Pittsburgh. Last night we celebrated the 10th anniversary of the Fisher House we built at the Pittsburgh VA. And since they opened a decade ago, that house has hosted thousands of families and veterans. And that's just one single house. This month we're going to turn over our 94th Fisher House in Columbia, South Carolina. And next year we're going to break ground on our 100th Fisher House. Think of that, 100 houses helping military and veteran families during a medical crisis, each one of those houses operating for decades. Chris, that's the lasting impact that your listeners and donors are making, a lifetime. I served in the military for 28 years. I'm a veteran the rest of my life. And long after I'm gone, the houses that your listeners are helping build are going to be there for service members, veterans, and their families.
And it's important to take into account that it's not just for wartime, and we have been at war for more than the last 20 years. And, China is ramping up, and the world is looking pretty shaky right now. But it's also about veterans from every war and even, not combat wounds, but cancer and every other medical issue and being there for the families. It's about doing the right thing.
Absolutely. Hey, when I had command, I didn't lose any of my sailors to enemy fire, but, I was more worried about car crashes, cancer, and cardiac. Every day life happens, and not just the service members. Their spouses get breast cancer. Their children get sick. There's accidents. If you're staying at a military hospital or someone in your family's being treated at a military hospital or a VA hospital where we have Fisher House, they can stay for free. That's what.
Thank you, Brian. The number is 888-294-8560. Please be generous.